Hi guys, Vince here once again, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Family, which was released in 2013 and features Robert De Niro, Michelle Pfeiffer, and a couple of other faces, which I'm sure you'll recognise. So The Family is a film which I just caught with my girlfriend last night, and I wanted to put the review out while it's still fresh in my mind. And yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a funny one for me. I went in, both myself and my girlfriend went in watching this with literally no prior knowledge other than just a synopsis and knowing who's in it. But this shouldn't be too long of a review because I don't have a tremendous amount to say about it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, overall, it's a really weird one. There's two major things which I feel, in all honesty, are issues which stick out in my mind with this film. The first of which is that it doesn't seem to quite know what it is or what it's trying to be. Now, I'm not an old-fashioned fuddy-duddy, and I'm not a person that says, oh, a film has to be this or it has to be that, and that's how we get new genres, and that's how things evolve, not just films, but video games, music, etc. We need that. But it's a bit of an odd one, this film, as it feels like it never really gets going, and yeah, that's the first major point. The second major point that sticks out in my mind is that we have these kind of anti-heroes, or I guess you could say in some respects not particularly likable characters, and the things that make them likable we shouldn't really like them for, but obviously that can work, and we've seen that in other things. You look at films like Chronicles of Riddick, Triple X series, which also coincidentally features Vin Diesel, and you know, your typical kind of bad guy turned good guy. Blade's probably another decent instance, and it can certainly work very well, and in parts it does work quite well for this film. My main issue is that, and again this goes back to the classic film formula, traditionally, and I have, although I'm certainly no professor, I have studied media. With every film, you have the beginning, middle, and the end. In the beginning, you set out who these characters are, what they're doing, and what their life is. In the middle, you introduce the problem, and in the end, we fix the problem. Now, there is a problem in this film, but it's not really a tremendous one. And throughout the majority of the film, I really felt like, okay, we're getting going now, we're moving towards something, and then it doesn't really happen. Then it stops, and then another one of the characters goes and does something, and then it's kind of like a load of mini plots within the family that go on, but nothing ever seems to really be particularly satisfying. There's one or two that can stick out in my mind. The daughter's plot line, I guess you could argue, does conclude, and then the son is moving towards something, and then we reach our final conclusion. But it feels like it never really gets going. And although I have to say I did enjoy certain parts of it, I do generally have quite a positive opinion of it. Most of this I fear is going to sound negative, just because it's a really weird one. I mean, funnily enough, it does have a lot of pedigree behind it. I haven't just watched the trailer before I've whacked the camera on. Martin Scorsese was a producer. They've had one of the producers from Taken, the original Taken, on board. Obviously, De Niro, arguably one of the greatest living actors. Certainly not doing what he used to do, but certainly someone I'm a big fan of. Them, Michelle Pfeiffer, she's a veteran as well. Certainly an A-list celebrity. So there's definitely some talent there, and we also have a couple of other names which aren't explicitly discussed, and Tommy Lee Jones is another veteran. So the talent's there, and there's certainly the potential. De Niro does exactly what you'd expect De Niro to do in a gangster-related film. He plays the guy he's been playing for the last 20 years, but he plays an older version of him, a more kind of jaded, wizened version than that guy. In some respects at least. And then Michelle Pfeiffer plays his wife. She's really brilliant, I have to say. I haven't seen much with Michelle Pfeiffer in, but I was really impressed. And yeah, overall, pretty solidly performed. The only person I found particularly difficult to care about, in all honesty, was the son. I don't feel like he wasn't badly performed. Well, maybe he just wasn't given much to work with, but I just didn't particularly feel like, you know, if you're going to play the whole anti-hero or bad guy act, then, you know, have a bit of charm or a bit of something, a bit of charisma behind you. But he didn't really have that. He just seemed to be a bit more kind of manipulative and conniving, without the charm and the wit that goes with that. You know, if you think of guys like the Joker and some of these typical archetype bad guys, or you know, somewhere in the middle. So moving on, I've got a bunch of points, and those who've watched my other reviews will be happy to hear that I'm slowly moving into the modern age, and I should, fingers crossed, be able to have a text box over here showing what I've got, and I'm going to hopefully try and get a trailer up as well, so that you've got something to look at other than my lovely face throughout the course of the review. So I'm just going to look at my notes now, and as I say, I should be able to load them up as well. So yeah, so just some of the points I've got here. So Pfeiffer's really good. De Niro plays as typical East Coast Italian gangster, acts to good effects, well directed, well paced. This goes back to my my point earlier. I actually was watching this with my girlfriend, and at one point halfway through the film, we both turned to each other and I said, well, I really don't know where they're going with this. I don't know what they're trying to achieve, because other than the synopsis, I didn't have any idea, and Netflix isn't always the best at their synopsises, and that's, you know, it's quite a damning thing to say about any film. It can be good if it's a kind of mystique about it, but I was just completely clueless. So unfortunately, that's definitely one of the things that sticks out for me. Yeah, hard to tell why we should care about these guys. Having said that, there are some redeeming moments, and I will say they do have some good acts. Anyone who's seen Analyze This or Analyze That, some of De Niro's earlier films where he plays the reforming bad guy gangster, will see that you get to see him rebelling and messing shit up, basically, and that's something we also get to see here, and that's still a lot of fun. The daughter in particular has a mean streak, which was shocking and interesting in equal measure. So that was definitely good to see. Yeah, just again coming back to the fact that it doesn't seem to quite know what it is. It's sort of Netflix, for me at least, is notorious for branding films as one type of genre when it's really not. I've watched so many films on Netflix that have been pitched as comedies, and they're just not. Like Phil, for example, was a good film. I really enjoyed it, but that was put down as a comedy. It has comic elements, but it's very dark. Another film which I'm struggling to remember, I think it's called Calvary. It's based in Ireland. It's about a priest and his struggles with religion and life in general. That was pitched as a comedy, incredibly dark. Certainly has some very dark tones that you might perceive as comedy, but that's as black a comedy as you'll ever see in your life. So yeah, just a word to the wise with regards to Netflix picking genres. And there are some good jokes here and there. There's a good little, couple of good little moments and bits of writing that are put to good use and acted out well. De Niro in particular has one, and it's such a minor thing, but it just shows how good De Niro can be when he can be bothered to. Yeah, and again, this kind of feeds back to the sort of sense of aimlessness. It does have a decent conclusion. We tie things up quite nicely, but then. And again, this comes back to the problem element of most stories. There isn't the problem that you perceive this family to have. They don't really solve it, and things just yeah, and that's kind of it. Now, in some respects, you could argue, particularly with gangster films, there is no end. With the gangster life in general, there is no end. It just keeps going until everybody's dead. So you could certainly counter that point, but it did make me feel a bit kind of like, okay, so what, you know. That's the overall feeling. It would have been nice to maybe have, you know, in a number of films they have the credits roll. Bobby went to college and did this and that. I'm making up the names. I can't remember the name of the characters off the top of my head. Tina went to art school or whatever. You know, it'd be good to have some sort of conclusion and sense of progression that is representative of these characters, but we didn't have that. And again, it does leave you a little bit. I think meh is the word I would go with. So overall, if I had to kind of if I had to put this film in a box, one way or the other, I'd put this as a kind of film that you'd watch on the plane or on a flight over to somewhere. If you're into New York from London or vice versa, you know, some kind of 4 or 5, 6, 7 hour flight, and you want something to watch, flick this on. It'll keep you occupied. You'll see some good moments. It's certainly not a classic, but it's a serviceable film. As far as score is concerned, I would give this 6.7. As I say, serviceable, not going to stick out in your memory, but if you want to kill a couple of hours and you like De Niro and you like the whole gangster vibe that he tends to be associated and work with, then you will have some fun here, and there are definitely some good moments. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it, guys. If you wanted to see more of my reviews and watch the quality of my reviews evolve, as I'm glad to say they are starting to, then don't forget to like and subscribe, and you'll see more content like this. And don't forget to let me know what you think, if you agree or disagree, is it a harsh or a fair score, and we'll see you again next time. Cheers.